From life, death, and everything in between, these are 5 Superman stories that you need to read.
Deep within a bleak and dismal swamp, hidden beneath its murky waters, lies the headquarters of the most sinister villains of all time, the Legion of Doom.
Hey super friends, Jake here from the Brave and the Boys, and you know how much I love my Superman, so I'm going to give you another 5 amazing Superman stories that you need to read. Now, I have done 10 best Superman stories, but I've read a lot more since then, so go check out that video, check this video out, and let's dive in. Coming in at number 5, we have probably the book that was commented the most times on my top 10 Superman list. Can't believe it wasn't on my top 10 list. That is the Superman Death and Return of Superman Omnibus. Spoiler alert, the name kind of gives it away. So here's the thing. Why was this not on my top 10 list? That's because I, crazily enough, hadn't read it yet. I had seen all the animated movies and the live action movies, but I had never read this behemoth. So after all of those maybe 50 comments saying, I can't believe this wasn't on your video, I said, I gotta read it. And read it I did. And oh my gosh, this is bombastic and loud. It is amazing in the omnibus format because some pages are just gigantic. There's even like a triple page spread that you're unfolding out and it just shows iconic moments. This book was 90s to the extreme. So there were some parts I wasn't a big fan of because I'm not a 90s comic reader because again, I was a little too young to read comics in the 90s. But this book has heart and it's incredible. So the book starts off with Superman facing off against Doomsday, and they make Doomsday like a force of nature in this book. He takes out the entire JLI. They don't even put a scratch on him, and Superman has his climactic battle. After Superman falls to Doomsday, you get Funeral for a Friend that shows how the loss of Superman affects his colleagues, his friends, even his villains, and you get to see how Metropolis changes dramatically after the loss of their hero. After that, there's cool moments where you get to see how the world moves on from him. You get to see the reign of the Superman arc, which means there's all these 4 sort of Superman figures that pop up that try to reclaim the Man of Steel, and they all kind of symbolize different aspects of Superman. And all the different aspects of Superman are represented in these pretenders or these people trying to claim the throne. There's his heroic human side, manifested in John Henry Irons. There's his Kryptonian side, manifested in the Eradicator, and numerous others. I don't want to spoil much more than the name spoils. I will say, though, that I didn't know what the heck was going on with Supergirl. I didn't know what the heck was going on with those crazy aliens that could give people powers. They look like dinosaurs. So there's a lot of 90s weirdos, weirdness in this book, but at its core is one of the best Superman stories I have ever read. Next up at number 4, we have Superman by Kurt Busiek, Volume 1. I had no idea this book was coming out. I had never read anything Superman by Kurt Busiek. I'd actually never read anything by Kurt Busiek. And this book grabbed my heart and ripped it into 1,000 pieces, and I absolutely loved it. So I'm going to focus on 2 primary storylines in this because I don't want to spoil the whole book. But the first one that I absolutely loved was Up, Up, and Away. This takes place a year after Infinite Crisis, where Clark, or Superman, has lost his powers. And you get to see him in Metropolis grappling with what it means to be a hero without having the powers of flight or laser vision. You get to see how his relationship with Lois and Jimmy evolves when he's not the Man of Steel. And you get to see other characters step up to fill the void. There's an iconic moment where Luthor punches Clark, and Clark falls to the ground with a bloody face, and Luthor goes, I always knew you had a glass jaw. Now, imagine if he had punched Clark when he had his powers. That would have been a much different story. But ultimately, you get to see how Lois feels about Clark with his powers, and you realize that the thing keeping his powers away could be psychological more than physical. So you get to see Clark wrestle with what it means to be a hero without his powers. Then they crank it up to 11 with Secret Identity. Secret Identity takes the Superboy Prime origin story of a boy in the real world named Clark Kent who reads Superman comics, always wishes to be a hero, actually developing them. And what would it be like to have superpowers in the real world, not the DC world? So this is a dramatic retelling of that. And oh my God, will it rip your heart again into 1,000 pieces. You get to see Clark grow up in a world where there are no other heroes and what that would mean for him wrestling with his secret identity. You get to see him change the world as a Superman in secret, but also change the world with his writing as Clark Kent. And ultimately, in the end, you get to see him have a family and how he would be with daughters and with Lois, and when he's aging in real time and getting a little slower and getting a little less strong. But did he leave the world a better place? Now, there is going to be a volume 2, and volume 2 is going to contain this awesome Camelot Falls. So look out for that one next year and make sure to grab it from Organic Price Books. Let's move on to number 3. Coming up at number 3, we have the Superman Warworld Saga Compendium. Now, here's the thing. I was formulating and in the process of scripting a video along the lines of top 5 Superman books that should have been an Omni, and this was going to be number 1. And before we got to film that video, they announced that this omnibus is coming out and it collects everything that you're going to need. Even though it's weirdly called the volume 1, I don't know what volume 2 will be, but this compendium is a great way to go. I will say though, there is a second book that I'm missing called Superman and the Authority, written by Grant Morrison, that you also should read. You don't need to read it. You can read this as is and love it, but there is more context to this newly formed Authority team led by Superman. But that's all I'm going to say for that. So what is this book? This book is Gladiator to the extreme. It shows that Superman is a hero above all else, and you get to see climactic battles, and it's like an adventure novel, honestly. It was wild. Superman realizes that he needs to go off-world and liberate Warworld because Mongol has enslaved tons of people, possibly Kryptonians. He can't take the Justice League because of some international events that have happened. They say, hey, we'll try to be there, but we can't. So instead, he takes this newly formed Authority team, which then you read the Grant Morrison book and they explain that more. But this book was incredible because what happens when they get to Warworld, they realize they're not fighting the Mongol who was, they're fighting the Mongol who is, who's much stronger, more powerful. He's got this amazing coterie of supervillains that just destroy Superman's team because, oh yeah, there's a red sun, Superman has no powers, and they're fading rapidly. So what happens? Superman is enslaved in prison, forced to fight in gladiator arenas, total Planet Hulk vibes, but it's its own thing, and it's Superman, and he's shirtless, and he's a hunk, and it's wild. But you get to see him slowly with the Authority characters form a rebellion and liberate Warworld. It was amazing. I read part of it in the compendium, and then I read the rest digitally because that was my month of reading digitally. But oh my god, am I going to buy this omnibus day one, and you should too. Coming in at number 2, another book that didn't exist when I made my top 10 list, even though a portion of it made it to my top 10 list. That is Absolute Superman by Geoff Johns and Gary Frank. Now, if you guys know me, you know I love my Superman and you know I love my Absolute editions. So the fact that we were getting newly collected material in the Absolute format for the first time with the art by the legendary Gary Frank, who I fell in love with on Doomsday Clock, it was a no-brainer. I bought this day one and I'm so happy. So what this collects is 3 primary stories written by Geoff Johns and Gary Frank. So sadly, it doesn't include things that Gary Frank didn't draw, like Last Sun, which I wish would be an absolute, and Escape from Bizarro World, which should never be in my collection because I hated that storyline. But the first storyline is Superman and the Legion of Superheroes, which made me fall in love with the Legion. I haven't read a lot of Legion. There's a lot of Legion Deluxe editions coming out in 2025, so I'm going to probably love them by the end. Superman gets time traveled to the future under a red sun where he lost his powers, and the Legion is in hiding, and the person ruling the Legion is a xenophobic, anti-alien guy who said Superman was never an alien. That was all propaganda. Superman fought to protect the Earth from aliens. So you get to see the ragtag team of the Legion of Superheroes where they're really outnumbered, and you get to see Clark show the world why he's a hero and why we should accept aliens. Moving on from that is going to be Superman Brainiac, which is a story that was so groundbreaking that it transformed every Brainiac interpretation ever since then, whether it was a Lego video game or whether it was a live action movie or something. Superman Brainiac transformed the Brainiac character so much so that the Brainiac I've known all my life originated from that comic book, which was wild to me. Moving on from that is Secret Origin, which was on my list of the top 10 Superman stories of all time. And what was so cool is that that book would be even higher on my list now, because after reading the Legion storyline, I had more love of the Legion. After reading the Brainiac storyline, I had more love for this Superman. I mean, this is a Superman that literally looks like he was drawn to be Christopher Reeve and just embodied by that spirit of love and hope and humanity that those Donner films instilled. And this is just everything great about Superman. Now, I will say, if we ever get just a Geoff Johns omnibus someday, that'll probably knock this out on the list. But you know what? This is the best we have these in this format. So let's move on to some honorable mentions and then number one. Now I want to give some love to some honorable mentions. First up is going to be Superman the Silver Age Omnibus. Now, this is a tricky beast for me because I have been reading it since it came out a couple months ago, and it is my first time ever reading any Silver Age thing other than some Silver Age Spider-Man and some Marvel stuff. But oh my gosh, it is like such a slow burn. You read an issue and it takes you what could have been several issues or even a whole trade paperback, but each one tells its own standalone story. Now, am I anywhere close to being done with this? Heck no. Is there parts that I hate about it? Yes, but it is so amazing because without this book, I never would have had other things that I truly fell in love with. So many parts of Superman's origin debuted in the Silver Age, and while it's wacky and kooky, and like half of it is like him pranking Batman and Batman pranking him, and aliens and mysteries, it's just so groundbreaking because of what it led to. Now, another book I want to give some love to, but I didn't want to include as one of my favorite storylines, is Superman Red and Blue. Now, the reason this wasn't included is because this isn't one story. This is actually an anthology series done highlighting the colors of red and blue. So I'll put up some artwork from that, and you can see how groundbreaking the art is. Done by some of the best writers in comics, some of the best artists in comics, each telling short little standalone stories. There's amazingly powerful ones, such as Clark overcoming personal tragedy when he was a prisoner. There's moments such as Superman talking to the son of an addict who Superman couldn't save, and what would Superman do to honor her. There's amazing moments where he's pranking Mr. Mixelpidalic. There's an amazing storyline where another dimensional imp took out all the colors in the world, and Superman has to decide, should the world have color again? It is amazing. They focus on his humanity. There was an awesome storyline where you get to see a waitress that has been in Clark's life in Smallville from him being a child through all these giant moments in his life at this local Smallville diner, and you get to see the humanity between them. And my favorite storyline was this random dude who has somehow been saved by Superman a bunch of times and also has saved Superman a bunch of times. This is an amazing book. I will do a longer video on just this one in general, and we get Daniel Warren Johnson writing and drawing Superman, which is incredible. So both of these should be an honorable mention, and let's dive into the best Superman story I've read since my last list. And finally, at number one, we have a Superman story that blew my mind and broke my heart. Superman Smashes the Klan. Now, I loved this story so much, but I will say I'm probably not the best person to talk about this book because so much of the storyline of this book is tied up in the immigrant experience, something that I just don't have context to. So I'll speak as someone who loves Superman and loves this book, but I won't have the perspective that others might have on this. So this is based off of the 1940s radio broadcast of The Adventures of Superman, where Superman battles the Klan, updated for the modern times by Jean Lewin Yang and the artist duo Gurihiru. I butchered that. You're going to laugh at me, but I did the best I could, okay? So this follows the Lee family as they move from Chinatown to Metropolis, and they experience xenophobia and bigotry and all kinds of nastiness, but they also love this new place in Metropolis, and they make friends such as Jimmy Olsen and the fellow people they play baseball with, and you get to see the daughter and the son have wildly different experiences. The mother and the father have wildly different experiences, and it's all paralleled perfectly in where Superman is at. This isn't a Superman that can fly. This is a Superman that can run fast and be strong. Why? Why is Superman not as powered as we know? And that's because his whole life he's also been dealing with the immigrant experience and xenophobia, and he's been hiding what makes him different, what makes him alien. Among these three beautiful issues, you get to see both the Lee family adapt and find a home in Metropolis, but also Superman learning to leave the shadows and be his true self, and it is just beautiful. You get to see awful, horrible villains some of them actually do get better and learn along the way, and it's just an incredible storyline. And then at the end of the story, you get a cool history of what led to the creation of this book. So it is an awesome storyline. I think everybody should read it, and I can't believe it took me so long to read it. Now, like I said, this was a beautiful story, and I might not be the best one to give context to it, but I think you should definitely check it out. let's jump into my final thoughts. And that's going to bring this video to a close. Like I've said before, Superman is my favorite superhero. I think he embodies everything great about DC Comics and superhero comics in general. And these are books that made me feel and want to be a better person. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you all for the love and support. I want to give a huge shout out to our Discord. It's linked down below. Come meet some awesome comic book nerds and make some friends. I also want to give a thank you to Organic Price Books. They do a lot to support us. There, if you want to buy 1 to 3 books, you can save $2 with our discount code Braveboys. Or if you're buying 4 or more, you can save 5% with the code Braveboyssit. If you like this video, consider commenting down below what your favorite Superman book is. Smash that like button, ring that bell for notifications, subscribe, and keep reading and stay brave.